Sixth graders, this is Mrs. Jones, and today we are looking at multiplying and dividing by multiples of 10. So first, we need to decide what is a multiple of 10. So a multiple is just a number that you say when you're skip counting. So multiples of 10 would be things like 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on, all the way up through the 100s, 200s, thousands, and infinitely on from there. So we're going to start with looking at multiplying by multiples of 10. And if you take a few seconds, look through these two patterns for what you see. When I look at this first pattern here with the 8s, I'm noticing that each time I'm doing 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 1 is 8, and so on. But then the number of zeros in my product, or the answer to the multiplication problem, matches the number of zeros with the multiple of 10. So here when it was 10 and there was 1 0, there's 1 0 in 80. Here it's 100, so there's 2 zeros, so it's 2 zeros in 800, and so on. Here it's a very similar pattern where I'm doing 56 times 1 to get 56 each time over and over again. And it's the same thing. The number of zeros in the multiple of 10 is the number of zeros in my product. Number of zeros in 100 is the number of zeros in my product. So I know now, if I am multiplying just a number by a multiple of 10, that's a trick that I can use to do that multiplication easily in my head. All right, if we continue to look at similar patterns, take a moment to see what you see. Right, these times I have to alter what I was noticing just a tiny bit. I can still do 3 times 1, basically ignoring the zeros for right now. And each time I have 3 times 1, so my product starts with a 3. But this time, instead of just the number of zeros in my multiple of 10, I also include the 0 in the 30. So I have 1 0 here and 1 0 here. So I have 2 zeros in my product. 1 and 2 makes 3 zeros in my product. Now this one, where we're multiplying by 2.4, is a little bit different because our first factor is a decimal. So you'll notice it still is like doing 24 times 1 is 24. 24 times 1 is 24. But the number of zeros doesn't necessarily match. That's because we have to first increase this place value to make this a whole number. So it's like the first thing we need to do is move this decimal backwards to make 2.4 into a whole number 24. That uses up that 0. So that's why our product here is 24. So here, if I move this place value back to make it a whole number, that uses up my first 0, and now I have 1 0 left. I'll show you one more. If I move this decimal back to make this a whole number, that uses up 1 0. So now I have 2 zeros remaining to make my product 2,400. So if we use those patterns now, that pattern again is that multiplying by a multiple of 10 adds place value to the number, and it moves the decimal point to the right. So I know that if I need to do 7 times 1,000, I can just do 7 times 1 is 7, and I have 3 zeros to add on to make this 7,000. And if I need to do 23 times 100, I just do 23 times 1 is 23, and I have 2 zeros to make this 2,300. Now again, 6.1, so I have a decimal, times 10. So to use up that 0, first thing I need to do is move my decimal 1, and that uses up that 0, so 6.1 times 10 is just 61. 485 times 10,000, I would just do 485 times 1 is 485, and I have 4 zeros. So my product would be, let's add some commas here, 4,850,000. Okay, very similarly, I can just do 903 times 1, which is 903, and add in those 6 zeros to make it 903 million. Okay. Expanding that pattern just a little bit. What if my one of my factors doesn't have a 1 in it? Well, we can still apply those same patterns. This time I'm just going to do 7 times 4, and I know that that is 28. And then I'm going to add on the 0. So 7 times 4,000 is 28,000. Again, 23 times 2. I know 23 times 2 is 46. And I have 2 zeros to add on, so it's 4,600. This time, 6.1 times 2, I'm going to do just like it's 61 times 2. So 6 times 2 is 12. 1 times 2 is 2, so 122. And now for that 0, I first need to move my decimal place back 1. That uses up that 0. There's no more to add, so that's just 122. 4 times 90,000. I know 4 times 9 is 36. And then I add on 4 zeros, so it's 360,000. 5 times 3 million. I know 5 times 3 is 15. And then I add on the 6 zeros to make it 15 million. So that's our trick for multiplying by multiples of 10. Okay, let's move on and look at dividing. Dividing by multiples of 10, again, we're going to look at some patterns first, so take a minute to see what you notice. On these ones, I'm noticing, again, 7 divided by 1 still gets me the 7 each time. But I'm noticing that my numbers here are getting smaller as I divide by larger and larger numbers. So how I'm looking at this is I'm seeing there's 3 zeros, there's 1 0, and I'm left with 2. So it's like these zeros cancel each other out so that there's only 2 left. This time, 3 zeros, 2 zeros. So if I cancel out 2 zeros from each number, that's why I'm left with 1. Right, and it's getting smaller and smaller until I need to move into decimal places because there would be more zeros to cancel out than I have. So again, if we look over here, I have 435 divided by 1, still gets me the 435. And that repeats in the second line and so on. But again, if I can cancel out those zeros, I have 2 left. If I can cancel out the 2 zeros, I have 1 left. Until again, I have to start using decimals, moving decimals into the number to make it smaller and smaller, because there would be more zeros to cancel out than I had in my original number. If we look at more complicated versions of those patterns, right, so here, noticing that in this number, I don't have any zeros to cancel out. So instead, remember that a decimal place is always at the end of the number, at the very far right of the number. So that 1 0 requires me to move that decimal to the left, and that's why it ends up with a 0.9. Here, the 2 zeros require me to move that decimal place 2 points to the left. That's why I end up with the 0.89, and then so on, depending on how many zeros are in the number that I'm dividing by. Here, that's almost even easier because there is already a decimal in 2.4. So when I have that 1 0, I move my decimal 1 place to the left to make this 0.24. When I have 2 zeros, I move this 2 places to the left, and I fill in that missing place value with a 0 to make it 0.024, and so on. So our rule for dividing by multiples of 10 is that dividing takes away place value from the number, so the decimal point moves to the left. So if we try it, again, I can start here by just doing 7 divided by 1 is 7. And then when I look at 70,000 and 1,000, I have 3 zeros that I can cancel out of each number, which means we with just 1 0 in the 70. So that answer would be 70. Same thing here. 23 divided by 1 is 23. This time I'm going to cross off 2 zeros from each number. Leaves me with 1 0 to make this 230. 6.1 divided by 10, so I do not have a 0 to cancel out, so I need to shift place value to the left. So that decimal place needs to move one number, because there's 1 0, one number to the left to make this 0.61. Here, now I'm going to start with doing 485 divided by 1. That's 485. And I'm going to start with canceling out zeros, but I'm noticing I have 2 zeros here and 3 here. So I can only cross off 2 from the 48,500. So for that 1 0 that's left to be used up, I need to now take my decimal and move it over into the number. So this answer is going to be 48.5. Here, 93 million divided by 1 million, so 93 divided by 1 is 93. And I have 6 zeros to cancel out, which cancels out all of the zeros also from 93 million to make our answer just 93. Okay, if we expand that pattern now to look at some numbers that aren't necessarily dividing by something that begins with a 1, it's very similar. We're still going to do 64 divided by 2, so I know 6 divided by 2 is 3, 4 divided by 2 is 2, so that's 32. And each of those zeros can cancel out, so it's just 32. Here I'm going to do 24 divided by 4. 24 divided by 4 I know is 6. And I have 3 zeros that can cancel out these 3 zeros, so my answer is just 6. I'll start with 32 divided by 2. I know that is 16. I have 2 zeros with the 200 that I will cancel out. That remains 1 0 from the 32,000, so this answer is going to be 160. 45 divided by 9 is 5. I have 2 zeros in the 900. That'll cancel out 2 from the 450,000, but there are still 2 left, so that answer is going to be 500. 1,800 divided by 30. 18 divided by 3 is 6. I have 1 0 to cancel out from the 30. That leaves 1 from the 1,800, so that answer is going to be 60. All right, so again, our rule for dividing by multiples of 10 is that it takes away place value, or if there's decimals that we need to do, we shift to the left. Okay, so that is multiplying and dividing by powers or multiples of 10. If you have questions, let your teacher know. Otherwise, go ahead and go on to your next task.